Hey everybody, my name's Jesse. I'm here with John from SKAA, and if you haven't heard about SKAA yet, you're going to want to watch this because SKAA is the whole world of wireless audio technology that is going to change your setups. Today we're going to run through one of the great features that is going to help you turn maybe some of those older devices you have into something that is relevant for today. Let's assume that people know about SKAA and want to dive a little bit deeper into using their devices. So you guys have always talked about SKAA as being like Lego, and you can build anything with it.
No, it's designed that way. You know, we get a lot of inspiration from Lego because you can use bricks that are old and new together. Everything always fits together, and what you can make with it is really unlimited. People used to have that, you know, in the 70s and 80s. They used to be able to connect anything together with this very common wiring standard called RCA.
Right.
And yeah, didn't matter, you know, if you had your stereo components and your TV from, you know, 4 different brands, you could wire all of that together any way you pleased, and it always worked. Isn't it just a little bit sad that, you know, there isn't anything equivalent, you know, contemporary and equivalent that's wireless even in 2023?
John, let's start by walking through what we're going to do today.
Let's take some powered speakers that we already have, and let's make them able to automatically switch between 3 disparate sources of audio that are all in and around the living room.
So 3 different audio sources being sent out to one set of speakers.
Exactly. They're not SKAA speakers. They're just powered speakers that I happen to own. And the 3 sources are my wife's computer. She's got a dated MacBook Air in the kitchen, television from 1997.
Oh, nice.
Sony XBR that refuses to die and still looks good. So it is still in service every day. You know, should I be able to get awesome sound out of that thing through my speakers? Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
And source 3 we're going to show is my turntable setup. So I have a turntable connected to a Yamaha receiver, only because turntables, turntable cartridges output audio at an extremely low level and biased, the EQ'd in a really weird way that needs to be un-EQ'd by something called an RIAA preamp. And my Yamaha from the 90s happens to
There's a theme here.
happens to have one of those. So everything is, you know, very humble and you know.
But I think it's it's awesome to show, because this proves that you could take things from the 90s and actually bring them up to the year 2023.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the results are fantastic.
Let's go through the process so that other people can do this at home.
The first thing we're going to focus on is upgrading our speakers. They need to become wireless receivers. So they need SKAA receive capability. There's a fantastic product that you can get on skastore.com, and it's called Rush. And it is a tiny little SKAA receiver that outputs analog audio. We're going to use 2 of them because my speakers are on opposite sides of the room. There's actually a walkway in between them. I still want to treat these as a pair of speakers.
Right.
You know, I don't want to have to deal with them. I don't want to have to adjust their volume separately. I don't want to have to adjust what they're listening to, you know, select the source of what they're listening to separately, because I'd have to do, you know, I'd have to do that twice, always. And luckily, SKAA has a great feature that is going to help me treat the 2 speakers as one product. And that feature is called clustering. So I can make the 2 pieces into a cluster. All I do is I power up one of the Rush receivers. These are both powered through USB power, so you can use that, you know, you use up that drawer full of USB chargers that you have. Grab 2 out of that drawer, and I'm going to put those back into service too.
That's good.
And yeah, so all I do is I apply power to the rush that I want to be receiver. The master receiver, whilst I'm holding down its bond button. There's a bond button. It's the middle button on the rush. It has two arrows. The button that has two arrows is always called the bond button. So I hold that button down, then I plug in the rush into USB power, and it starts up. Its bond indicator, which is an LED, will start to fast flash red, which tells me that process is begun. And then as soon as I see it fast flashing red, I'll power up the other one, and that one I don't have to hold anything down. And they will find each other in the air, and they will the master will connect to the other one, and that LED will become solid red, and then boom, they've become a cluster of two. And from that point forward, I don't have to touch the subordinate one. I just deal with the master, and everything I do on the master, the other one will mimic exactly.
Okay. All right. So now that we've got those clustered together, so two speakers as one, and how do we make our sources now send what we want to that?
The laptop, for that, we use the Ursula transmitter, and it just plugs into one of those ports. And as soon as you plug it in there, it becomes an audio output that's selectable from the sound control panel in the Mac OS. And you select it once, and your Mac will send your Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or whatever it is, YouTube. It'll send all of your audio output to that device. The TV, again, is from 1997. It has an analog output available on it, which I've used a two RCA to one 3.5 millimeter cable to make that connection into an Akiko transmitter. It's capable of listening to a remote control. You can program it to take the volume up, volume down, mute commands from a remote control that you already own.
Now, this is really cool, because this to me was always the issue with adding on other devices, is because my wife would have like 14 remotes in her hand, and she's like, which one does which? And you guys have actually programmed into the transmitter a way to actually sync your remote to it.
Yeah, it'll learn your remote, and that way you don't have to add to your farm of remotes. I'm sure your farm is as healthy as my farm and doesn't need to grow. We'll get into this when we get to the third source. We'll actually show you how to program
cool.
The transmitter for that. Now, if I had a more contemporary TV, which I'm sure sometime in the next 10 years, this Sony, from the heyday of Sony's history, will probably bite the dust sometime in the next 10 years. It's already 25 years old, so it doesn't owe me anything. And the next TV I'll get, it will probably have a digital audio output on it, like Toslink or coax SpeedIF. There is a transmitter that looks like the Akiko transmitter, and all of these are available on SKAA Store, which accepts the digital audio from the TV.
Okay.
And it's designed specifically for that, and it has that same cool. It will learn your infrared remote control commands feature as Akiko does. And really, the solution for my turntable is again using an Akiko that Yamaha outputs a nice analog signal, which again I wire into an Akiko. And
so when I have my remote and I want to make it work with my transmitter, what do I do?
I never want to listen to a record and watch TV in my living room at the same time. There was absolutely no reason why not to use exactly the same three buttons on my Sony remote for the TV, for controlling the Akiko plugged into the TV and the Akiko plugged into the turntable solution. I never have to think too hard about what those buttons are because I use them all the time
Right.
in both cases. Now, notice, no infrared remote is required when my wife uses the speakers for her computer because she's got volume control right on the computer, which flows through to the speakers. So this is only for the other two. All right, so let's go through the process. For this old Sony, what I opted to do is just use some unused buttons on that remote control. So it's important when you're teaching the Akiko your remote commands that you don't have any audio cable plugged into the Akiko.
Okay.
So there's a bulbous kind of sensor on the Akiko, which is the infrared receiver. And there's a tiny little pinhole on it as well, which has an LED behind it that gives you some feedback. So you want that pinhole up and you want the bulbous infrared receiver pointed towards you. That Akiko into USB power, and it powers up. And because there's no audio cable plugged into it, it knows that you want to teach it your infrared remote. And you just press the buttons in order slowly. So you press volume up, right, which could actually be your volume up button or some unused button that you want to appropriate for a volume up. I press whatever button I want to use for volume down next. And then the last one you press is the one that you want for mute, which is for both mute and unmute. After every press, it'll give you a flash to tell you, yep, I learned that one. And then after the last one, it'll flash to tell you that it learned all three and it's ready to go.
What happens if you mess that up? Can you just start the process?
Yeah. Just unplug it, plug it back in, try again. There are buttons on remote controls that don't actually send any infrared. They do something internal to the remote instead. So it may be that you have to, try a couple of sets of buttons on the remote that you want to use. My advice is teach the other Akiko exactly the same three buttons as the first Akiko. It's super handy. It'll remember that those infrared buttons forever until you teach it some new ones or disable the feature. If you ever want to disable the feature, you just you do the process, but you press the same button twice. Pressing the same button twice tells the Akiko that, hey, you want to basically turn the whole feature off. It'll it won't listen to infrared after that, and it'll just keep the volume as high as possible instead.
All right, so we got the receiver clustered together. How do I switch between all these different sources now?
First thing we have to do is let that master receiver know that there are the three sources are out there, and so we're gonna let it know about them, and it's going to store them in a list called the green list. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear out that green list. So I'm starting from scratch. And how I do that is that button, that bond button with the two arrows on it, I click it 6 times, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I get a nice fast flash red feedback. It flashes a bunch of times telling me, yep, I've cleared out that green list. It is now empty. Next, I'm going to teach it my 3 sources. And I'm going to make life real simple on myself. I'm going to just do one at a time. So I'll play some music from my wife's computer. Since the computer source is the only one that's playing audio right now, it'll bond to it and it'll start playing audio out those speakers. Once I do hear it, I'll say, okay, well, I want to remember this one. So I'll do a long press on that bond button, again, the button with 2 arrows, and that bond indicator will go from amber to green. And that means that source has now been remembered. And it's on the green list. It's in position 1 on the green list. And there are up to 10 positions, but you don't need to use all 10. You just use however many you need to. There is a 2-page guide to all of the features that button does. And it's called the SKAA Receiver User's Guide. And you can download it from SKAA.com/TLC. Basically all the commands on one side and questions and answers on page 2. Pretty concise and super handy document to have at your side when you're doing this stuff. We'll continue with building up our green list. So what we've done so far is we've added the first source, which is the computer in the kitchen. So next TV, I'll turn on my TV. I'll watch a show. As soon as there's audio flowing to it, the Akiko will wake up and it'll start transmitting. And now I have to tell my rush to look for it, because it's going to, it was connected to the computer, and it's going to be looking for that computer until it comes back, unless I tell it to do otherwise. So I'm going to tell it to do otherwise. I'm going to click twice on the bond button, and that will take that rush back into amber mode, which is the explorer mode, and it'll be looking for something new instead of something that it knows, which is, so far just one thing. That indicator will turn amber, and it'll find the TV right away and start playing the audio from the TV show. Now, I want to remember that source as well. So I do the same thing. I do a long press on the bond button, and that indicator turns from amber to green. And as soon as it does, that tells me, hey, I've remembered this source as well. And then I just do the same thing. I repeat for the turntable. My green list is set up. It's set up. It's gonna stay set up. It's it'll remember those three permanently. All you have to do is click once on the Rush's bond button to rotate through the three. You click once and you've got the computer. You click once, you've got the TV. You click once, you've got the turntable. It rotates through the green list entries. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If I had 4, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a big circle. So that's fine, but it does involve me having to walk over to my master rush and do that clicking until I get the one I want. And in some circumstances, that's exactly the ideal situation. I don't do that. What I can do is I can put that rush master receiver into a mode. There's a mode called red mode. It's also called swing mode. And you get to it by clicking the bond button 4 times. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and the bond indicator turns red. And what does it do in that mode? Well, it will just bond to the source, the first source that it finds that's on the green list. It's very simple. To use red mode, all you do is you just make sure the sources that you don't want to hear are off. That way I never have to touch it. So I never have to select the speakers. I just let that rush automatically switch to the one that's playing audio right now.
Well, John, thanks so much for talking with us today and walking us through the whole clustering and sending multiple audio sources together. If you're interested in learning more, you just head to their YouTube channel, youtube.com/SKAA Sound, or head to skastore.com and check out all the receivers and transmitters. You'd mentioned before that there's consumer level and right up to pro level transmitters, receivers for even live performance.
There's classes of SKAA transmitters and receivers for you, regardless of what it is that you want to accomplish.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Check out the links below in the description. We have all those tutorials and all the documentation that you would need and what we used in this episode to make all this work. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time for another SKAA-related tutorial.